Summertime.
Summer.
Starting to warm up.
Getting hot out there.
That means that there are creatures that are out there.
Yeah.
That some good, like butterflies.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Some that are also good, but do
don't know where you're
have
going.
some danger.
I don't think I like what you're going to say next.
Snakes are out there.
Wow, straight from Genesis 3. Yeah. Oh, man.
So crazy enough, my almost youngest daughter, Julia, has really taken a liking to trying to identify snakes.
Julia, don't do it. Say it ain't so.
So we've been working through, we started out with the 6 venomous snakes of our area.
As you do.
And hey, I'd be able to identify these. And it is crazy how, those really well, then you start to learn other ones, and you go back and you start misidentifying the ones you should know really well.
I know what you mean. I can totally relate.
But she's been doing pretty good because there can be some.
I'm gonna quit. So if I had to see her next time, what's like a quiz? I could be like, hey, have you seen the orange rattler? Like, what's a snake name? I'm not.
Yeah, you should probably pull up a
picture.
Storaria occipitomaculata.
Okay.
AKA common name red-bellied snake.
Ooh, okay.
And just show a picture of that and say, hey, can you identify this snake?
I will.
Because those are highly variable, but very pretty snakes. Yeah.
Wow.
Small,
Snakes.
like adults get 12 to 15 inches long. That's as big as they get.
Man.
They're fossorial snakes, so they live underneath leaves and clutter, and they eat soft-bodied invertebrates like snails, slugs, worms, that type of stuff. Yeah.
Boy.
It's good for gardens.
Snakes. Hey, I'm growing a garden. Maybe I should throw a few red bellies in there.
Yeah, if you see one, definitely don't kill them. But it is possible.
Yeah.
If you're not watching where you're going, you could get or if you're messing with one, you could get nipped by a venomous snake.
That's a bad day.
It is a bad day. Could be a costly day. But PSA, and this is no hit against some of our listeners like Cordell. But
What, does he not like snakes?
Oh, no, he's a doctor.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're about to slam the medical profession. Okay.
I'm just saying that there's a lot for a doctor to know. And snake bites are relatively rare, actually.
Yeah. I don't know that many people that have been by even non-venomous, like snakes in general.
Yeah. Well, Phoebe, she's been bitten by a non-venomous snake.
Wow. So that's like the only person I've ever met in my life.
Well, I've
Okay,
been.
maybe two. Yeah. I don't know, but I guess you relocate them a lot. It's bound to happen.
Yeah, if you pick up a non-venomous snake, well, if you pick up any snake, you're saying I'm okay with you biting me.
Yeah,
because that is their one defense. Wow. Well, they musk, so they kind of get stinky. But that's their one real defense.
They musk.
They do. Water snake musk, horrible. Anyways, PSA.
Yeah.
There is a group on Facebook. So you have to join Facebook called National Snake Bite Support.
NSBS, baby. I love it.
Yeah, just National Snake Bite Support. And I can actually put a link to the group.
Oh, I hope you do.
In our description.
Our listeners are just dying to join that group.
Well, the thing is, you might want to join this now. If you're prepared, if you or a close loved one are bitten by a venomous snake, because there are doctors on here who are specialized in the treatment of snake bites, and they will talk. Your ER doctor who this is the first snake bite they've seen, and they're trying to remember everything they learned in med school, and they're looking up. They actually have they can go look up like a little computer system. Like, what should I do? Like, remind me what I learned in med school. Yeah. So that's what they're probably doing. But they'll walk them through what blood test to run, what to be looking for, indications, proper treatment, not proper treatment. A lot of doctors, anti-venom is expensive.
Yeah.
And a lot of doctors will try.
Is it because of tariffs?
What's that?
I'm just kidding. No, just keep going. Yeah.
No. Yeah, we can talk about how it's made. How it's made is,
sorry I brought it up.
They have to basically milk the venom glands of venomous snakes. So there's someone who just has a whole bunch of venomous snakes. Yeah. Every 3-4 days, they extract the venom, and then they'll inject a little bit of that into all these horses. Because horses are pretty robust against them. And so then that horse blood will build up antibodies against the enzymes in the venom, and then they can extract that horse blood, centrifuge it out and get the anti-venom out of there.
There you go.
But anyways, long story short, if you or your loved one is in a situation where you find yourself having been bitten by a venomous snake, get in contact with them, there's no need to bring the snake into.
I always heard that. Got to catch.
Yeah, got to catch it so you know which one it is, and then that results in more
you get bit
bites.
3 more times.
And then the ER staff does not want that there. There are 2 types, big categories of snakes that you could get bit from.
Okay.
Vipers.
Okay, I've heard of them.
Or the coral snake. And we have coral snake antivenom, and then any other viper has the same antivenom because they're closely related.
Similar, yeah.
So, and that means your cotton mouse / water moccasins, same snake. Your copperheads, your canebrake / timber rattlers, your diamondback rattlers, your, if you're over on the East Coast, your Southern Pacific rattlers, or your red,
I'll tell you what,
rattlers.
copperheads. I feel like everyone's like, oh, there's a bunch of copperheads under there. Like that's like the go-to. If you don't know a snake, just say copperhead because they're everywhere.
They're very common, and they're probably because they're so common, and they're in the South where there's more. There are other common snakes out in the deserts, but people aren't there, so they're probably the most common where people are. They do account for the most bites.
There you go.
And some people discount the copperhead because it does probably have a lower toxicity of venom, but that doesn't mean you don't need to get it treated. If you get bit by a venomous snake and you have any systemic issues like temperature, swelling, pain, other than just a puncture pain, but systemic pain, you need some antivenom.
Man, so. PSA, watch out for those. Speaking of snakes.
Yeah, snakes.
There's a bunch of snakes out there. They're all about that filthy lucre and mammon. We're talking money today.
Oh,
and
are they? So they're serving the mammon.
They are all about the mammon, which you can't serve God and mammon.
That's right.
They're serving the mammon. Just real quick, if you had to pull, I chat GPT'd this.
Ooh.
Top salaries for pastors out there. Use pastor very loosely.
Yeah.
False teachers are they're fair game. You got any guesses who would top this list?
Out of the top 10.
Top 10, yeah. Just I bet you would do well. I'm looking at these names. Most of these.
And this is just because we have talked a little bit, so I know like some people get.
Yeah.
Is this including all sources of income? Basically?
Yeah. This is also book sales count, which skews things a little bit,
So, I mean, let's start with some of the, who I'd say legitimate top salary getters. Okay. Piper, is he on there?
Oh, see, this list is almost exclusively not conservative.
Non-legitimate, okay.
Yeah, almost. This is ChatGPT what they pulled
Okay,
too.
Driscoll
is not on there. Think more... more out there.
More out there. Is it?
Think about having your best life or whatever it is.
Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen is number 1.
Nice.
Like his net worth is like between, this is broad range, $40 and $100 million. But obviously his books are like, so that's like number 1.
I can't remember any of these names. The guy that like speaking in tongues back and forth, who has the big jet.
Oh, yeah. So I'll just run through some of these names.
Yeah, maybe.
So T.D. Jakes is on there. As you would probably guess. He's just, I saw somebody. Benny Hinn's on there.
Benny Hinn. Yeah.
Creflo Dollar. What a name. Creflo Dollar. He was meant to be a health, wealth, and prosperity gospel.
Is that a stage name or is that his birth certificate name?
Either way, it's like not good. Like if you like chose this name, but maybe it does fit the brand. Like, hey, I trust God, so I'm rich. Right. I don't know enough about him. Kenneth Copeland, who had that interview you were thinking of probably.
Yeah.
It was great. He just some of these people, the way they look. So a little more conservative. Not saying he's my guy or anything. He's still out there. Rick Warren, Purpose-Driven Church or Purpose-Driven Revival, whatever. Joyce Meyer, that smile looks awfully like the Joker. I don't know. It's too much. And then the most conservative guy, bottom of the list, most of it's from nonprofit salaries, not church necessarily. It's Franklin Graham, but from Samaritan's Purse and stuff like that. He does pretty well for himself there. But his annual salary is closer to $1 million versus like tens of millions. You know what I'm saying?
Oof.
Anyway.
Did you know that Rick Warren was actually pulled over one time for speeding?
No.
Yeah, but he was in the back seat, and there was a dolphin driving his vehicle.
Seriously?
Yeah, and the officer was like, "What is up?" He's like, "Don't you know my whole life is porpoise driven?"
Porpoise. I was like, where's this going? But it kind of fits because I'm pretty sure they have an aquarium at their church. Like, I'm not joking. like a experience that like you can like buy tickets to.
Yeah. It's like kind of like the Ark Encounter.
Yeah. That's so good. But I bring that up because we're talking money. How much should a pastor make? Because I think opinions are everywhere on this.
Yeah.
Do they make a lot? Should they be poor? But anyway, we got the definitive answer here.
Yeah, we're gonna give you the formula. You just plug in the size of your church, your zip code,
yes,
and a couple other things, and it will crunch you what you should be paying your pastor. That's the biblical number.
I love it. Well, let's jump into it. Let's go ahead and take it to the next level. From the heart of the Low Country in South Carolina,
it's the Take Two podcast, where we take theology to the next level. All right, what should you pay a pastor? Because we're talking about finances.
Yeah.
And I saw this recently on a Facebook post because people were pretty upset about Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen. Yeah. What, something recent happened with him, or it was just recirculating something?
It's just recirculation. Yeah. And I believe there are a group of pastors who have sold quite a number of books. I think Joel Osteen is there.
Yeah.
John Piper. Rick Warren, who actually don't take a salary from their church. But obviously their church has platformed them so that they can make money in these other ventures that they're doing.
Yeah. And what's tricky about some of this too, it all gets wrapped up together. You know, if you're at that level, you're probably pretty entrepreneurial. Like you're like probably, I don't know. And on some level, I think in any other profession, if you're like in the top 100 engineers in the world, you probably should make a lot of money. Or if you're in the top, I don't know, you know what I mean? Where a lot of that like goes hand in hand. But
how much do the top 100 podcasters make in the world?
We wouldn't know. Hey, but with your help, every subscriber helps. Maybe we could know one day. But so, and it's one of those things where, and it's like you're in the ministry, so should you make money? I don't know. It's like, and I honestly, I think a pastor's role is tough because so much of it is semi-public or public. And some churches hide this stuff. That's a red flag.
Right.
But it's like, that's like just it's a tough situation or conversation to have, I think.
Yeah, and here's another thought about, before we dive into the notes proper, I have mixed thoughts about public education.
Okay, yeah.
My kids, your kids are both in private school. I think we've said that more than once. And the private school teachers, they don't make as much as the public school teachers.
Right.
But I think public education is a good thing, but when the government gives it for free, then it kind of brings down what people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and or even value. It's like you don't. If you get something for free, you tend not to value it. I think that's like a thing that happens.
Right. And so I am for, let's take some of the money that we're spending on all of the computer hardware and the screens that we're putting in front of the kids' face and put that to teacher salaries. Not because I think necessarily that every single teacher who's in the public school system is doing such a good job they need a raise. But I think that the more you pay them, the more you are going to attract
that's smart.
higher quality people, and we'll be able to compete for those jobs. So if you take that paradigm over to pastoring, you don't want someone who is just in it for the money, obviously.
Yeah.
But there may be someone who might be otherwise highly qualified, but is like, and you could argue, I'll argue against this, but you might have someone who could, but it's like with, my number of kids and everything like that, it just can't make it financially work right now.
And I think what's complicating, inflation, it's to everyone really hard. And then it's like, do you want your pastor commuting an hour to your church? Like for some of the people, if you live in a coastal city or something, is that like ideal or not? How do you think about maybe some of that place?
For us, it'd be like saying, you go get a house in Jedburgh.
Where
the property prices are lower because it's not as developed, but commute in an hour or longer.
Or longer, And I think, I don't know if we'll get into it, but, do you want your pastor to be bivocational? Maybe you do. I mean, maybe it depends on your church. Maybe that's a good thing with the people. Maybe it's like, no, we actually want to protect his time so he can give it to the flock.
Yeah.
A lot of good things to consider there. So I think this is a fascinating topic, and people are just, I think, all over the place.
All right, so there are some ethical implications that we should consider when we're talking about this transparency or the lack thereof. Should everyone know what a pastor is making? I know for our church, we put out a budget, and you can see what, who all is getting paid what. Some of this plays into your understanding of doctrine or theology.
Yeah.
So if you have an understanding that someone who is living right with God is promised to be prosperous,
your pastor better be making money.
Then you got it right. Yeah.
Or it's a house of cards, right?
Right.
Be like, I'm coming here to make money, and you're not making money.
Yeah.
You must be not right with God.
Right. Yeah. So
that's a good point.
That bleeds into it. And then there's some accountability issues that, without the proper checks and balance, there's a risk of, someone being money focused.
Yeah.
And as we're in this sermon series, we're not doing sermon recaps, but Joel will often say we all think about finances all the time. It's something that we're all thinking about. But are we thinking about it the right way? And so I would never say a pastor shouldn't be thinking about finances, because he has to take care of himself and his family and all those things. So
no, I love all of this because, and only the worst things, maybe not the worst things, but it's like with social media, all these scandals happen, and 9 times out of 10, whether it's financial or not, it's because there wasn't a lack of transparency. It's because there was no accountability. Right. Someone just had all the power, and they went, and you're kind of like, how did it get there? But it's always these personalities, it seems like, that are very successful, good at what they do.
Yeah.
But you're like, man, there's no way there was transparency or this wouldn't happen. So I think those are good things to bring up.
All right, so we have this model, and we did our Old Testament tithing and offering podcast.
Yes.
And all of those went to support basically the theocracy of Israel. So you had the priesthood, the Levites, who were being supported by those tithes and offerings that were coming in. New Testament model isn't tithes and offering, but it's cheerful giving. But then we do have some scripture that points to the idea that those who are teaching or in an elder role perhaps should be compensated for that. So we got 1 Timothy 5:17 through 18. You want to read that one for us?
Yeah. Paul writes, the elders who rule well are to be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who work hard at preaching and teaching. For the scripture says, you shall not muzzle the ox while he is threshing, and the laborer is worthy of his wages. Classic verse that's great for like, the Bible is inerrant and all these things, you look at these quotations, but also good that, pastors, especially those preaching and teaching, should be compensated in some capacity.
Yeah, and so we even see this thing, double honor.
Yeah, what's that mean?
What does that mean?
I had a teacher in my undergrad Bible doctrines class who, he was like, the way he took this was, you should take, the average of your congregation, and your pastor should be compensated twice what is average, or like what's median for the area. And that's what you should shoot. Whether you can do it or not, that's like the goal. That's what you should kind of shoot for. And then your pastor that preaches and teaches regularly can devote that time. He's not like, worrying for how his needs are met, and he can kind of be in that position. That's kind of that was kind of where he felt this verse landed.
Yeah, that's good. And elders are called to exercise hospitality, and that takes resources to do. I know that our local pastor Joel, meets with a lot of folks, and some of that is taken off in his, if he has lunch and it's under the he's meeting with someone, discipling someone, I think he has part of his salary package devoted to those expenses so that those can be tax-free. I don't know exactly how, but that is an expense that pastors make, because they're going to visit people, they're talking to people, so they need to have those resources.
Yeah, I like that there is at least some part of Scripture that considers this, because, man, I mean, can you imagine like Pastor Joel like not being able to do those things, or you know what I mean? It's like that impacts his ministry tremendously.
Yeah, because huge amount of people could show up, but if no one's ever reaching out to them, talking to them, and obviously there's a role that the body at large should be playing.
Yes. Yeah.
But, Joel does a lot of that for us, and it helps weave things together.
I don't think this is speaking this is not a bad thing to say, but like Pastor Joel, he's got a nice in-ground pool put in his yard.
Yeah.
But he uses that all of the time. Right. It's like it is a ministry thing where he's like, everyone's over at his house. Mm-hmm. So we got time the kids are doing it. It's and it's like, it's not like he's got a $18 million house. It's a nice area of town, and probably with appreciation and everything doing really, really well. But it's like that's a really nice asset to have that he is stewarding very well.
No, that's good. All right, next passage that speaks to this, 1 Corinthians 9, 7 through 14. This is not in our notes. Do you want to, should we just read through those? You want to pull it up?
For the whole 7 or 8 verses, whatever we got there. 1 Corinthians 9, 7 through 14. I got it here. Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard without eating any of its fruit? Or who tends a flock without getting some of the milk? Do I say these things on human authority? Does not the law say the same? For it's written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain. Is it for oxen that God is concerned? Does he not certainly speak of our sake? It was written for our sake, because the plowman should plow in hope that the thresher thresh in hope of sharing in the crop. If we have too sown spiritual things among you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? If others share this rightful claim on you, do not we even more? Nevertheless, we have not made any use of this right, but we endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. Do you not know that those who are employed in the temple service get their food from the temple, and those who serve at the altar share in the sacrificial offerings? In the same way, the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. This is extensive. Yeah. Paul, I think this helps give some context where Paul, and it's funny if you read this and you're like, Paul didn't take money. That's like your takeaway, right?
Right, because did you get, that was through 14, right?
That was through 14,
And read 15 now.
15 says, but I have made no use of any of these rights, nor am I writing these things to secure any such provision, for I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of my ground for boasting.
Yeah, so Paul is like saying, he's going to lay down the letter of the law. Like, this is the natural way of things. Soldiers, they should be able to make their living off of soldiering. Vineyard workers should be able to make their living off of the vineyard. Temple priests back in the Old Testament were able to make their living. So the people who are teaching and preaching and serving in that way, and
kind of makes sense.
Yeah, you're if you're asking them to do it at full time, then it should be a full time job where they're getting paid.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think Paul's going so far to say like, hey, this would be okay for me to ask, but I'm not going to ask because I don't want you guys. Right. There's no obstacle, but you're right. The point stands that he's like listing the example after example that no one thinks those things are weird. No one's like, oh, you're going to pay your troops. Like, no. So why not? Why would this not apply in this case?
No, that's great. All right. Galatians 6:6, the one who is taught the word is to share all good things with the one who teaches him. So I actually hear this most in the context of Stand to Reason. So Greg Kokel, he doesn't make financial appeals often. Normally towards the end of the year in August, they try to get 100 new strategic partners every August. But he'll say, yes, you should be giving to your local church. And we always give before we ask to receive. But if you have been profiting from us, we're going to ask that we can maybe profit from you some. And so there may be ministries out there like Stand to Reason or Answers in Genesis or whatever.
I'll
throw it out.
Wow, Ken Ham throwing him a bone.
Yeah.
Wow.
If there are ministries that you are profiting from, then maybe you should consider, giving them some amount. Not, I'm not trying to say equal to what you give to your local church, but supporting them in some way because you are learning from them.
You're gaining something. Right. It's like, you wouldn't just take a candy bar for free. Right. And, it's a little bit different,
I
might. The point.
But yes, I the principle, yes.
Numbers 18:21 through 24, an Old Testament principle. Moses writes, to the Levites, I have given every tithe in Israel for an inheritance in return for their service that they do, their service in the tent of meeting, so that the people of Israel don't come near the tent of meeting, lest they bear sin and die. But the Levites shall do the service of the tent of meeting, and they shall bear their iniquity. It shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations and among the people of Israel for they shall have no inheritance. For the tithe of the people of Israel, which they present as a contribution to the Lord, I've given to the Levites for an inheritance. Therefore, I've said to them that they shall have no inheritance among the people of Israel. And so, not that we live by the Old Testament, but we see this kind of pattern, this principle that, Levites were set apart. They didn't have land. They were kind of, and on top of that, they bore the sin and were at risk for dying. Like they had a little bit of risk in here that they went on behalf of the people that they kind of deserve some of this contribution.
That's good. All right, so those are kind of our positive, some of our positive biblical passages towards paying our pastors. Whoa, couldn't talk there for a little bit. Here's some biblical warnings and abuses or examples of them. I think if you've read through your Old Testament, you're familiar with Eli, his sons Hophni and Phinehas. And, there were certain ways, I guess they were supposed to dip a hook in this pot, and it would basically, whatever the hook came up as what the portion was for the priests. So the priests were kind of still dependent on God for, their daily sustenance. I think it was a reminder of that.
And they were kind of just like, give me, I get all this.
They said, give me the ribeyes. You can take the New York strips, type of thing. So they were, they took meat from the offerings before it was sacrificed. They practiced sexual immorality, abused their role. And we'll see that all of Eli's line were snuffed out so that he didn't have any descendants, if I'm reading scripture right.
Yeah. And if we're kind of applying that principle, someone's overindulging themselves, or, someone's abusing the church fund. Not wanting to call anyone out, but we're not afraid of controversy. We were talking about this before. Mark Driscoll was like, he has this book, Real Marriage, that New York Times bestseller, but a lot of it was like using church funds to try to prop it up. I don't know if it was illegal or legal or whatever, but it was like over $200,000 of church funds, which seems excessive. I mean, it's a big church. I can understand if Pastor Joel wrote a book, if the church was like, hey, let's get 100 copies for everyone, 200 copies, like that seems like
in the ballpark of reasonable.
Whether like just trying to artificially do something or something that would just benefit.
Let's buy $1 million worth of this book.
Right. Ay.
All right, so another bad example, Micah 3:11 says, her leaders pronounce judgments for a bribe, her priests instruct for a price, and her prophets divine for money. And so you see the motivation there, obviously there's lots of proverbs that talk about, being wary of a bribe and, and there's nothing actually wrong for priests to obviously be paid, or for maybe a profit to be taken care of. But when the motivation changes from let's do what's right and I'm going to trust God to take care of me before it, but it changes for your money focus, then that's a problem.
Yeah, don't like that at all. Staying in the Old Testament, Malachi 3:8 through 10, whole section we've got this diatribe really on robbing God through tithe and offerings. People are like, what do we do, God? And God's like, well, you are actually robbing me. You're withholding what truly belongs to me. And God calls them that, hey, you need to actually bring your full tithe into the storehouse, not just say you're doing this and cut corners and all of these things. Not a good practice.
Nehemiah, one of the shortest in the Old Testament, records where Levites and singers had to stop basically their work in the temple, go back out to the fields because the tithes weren't coming in. And so Nehemiah rebukes the officials for neglecting God's house and tries to get that back set in order.
So all that to say, you should support your church, your pastor's salary through giving.
Right. Very good. All right, so going back to Paul, we see Paul was kind of bivocational in some times. It's like it's hard to say that that is not anti-biblical or something. But he basically makes the argument that someone should be able to make their living from. It shouldn't have to be bivocational, but there may be situations where they were. I think that sometimes Paul worked and, was making tents, but was also supported by another church. I believe I recall that. So he's saying, these people supported me during this time, even, I was making, so he's kind of getting some money from his tent making, some money from another place that he had already established while he ministered to a new place. Because I think Paul's especially as the gospel's spreading, he doesn't want people to think I'm just doing this to get money.
Yeah. It's always tough to, like, you want to emulate Paul. Maybe not the pattern for most pastors either.
Yeah.
Like, hey, but I think that's good. He did talk a lot about, don't be idle. Set this example. He wrote in his letters, if you don't work, you don't eat. You're worse than a believer. All these things.
Yeah.
So his goal was, I'm not only am I, doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not being lazy. I'm doing my job really, really well.
Yeah, and I should just look at my notes. Philippians 4:14 through 18 details where Paul received financial support from the Philippians while he was ministering elsewhere. So they had supported him while he was ministering, and maybe that was when he was in jail, and maybe tent making was less of an option. But yeah. All right, so practical wisdom. How much is too much? Is $1 million a year too much for a pastor?
This is funny because I'll compare and contrast this. My guy, John Piper, I might be making this up. I don't know if he lives off of book sales or not, but he takes a very modest salary, and it's probably because of book sales. John MacArthur, a guy who I respect a ton, he makes a lot of money. I was looking this up. I don't know if these are totally true, but he's making like $400,000 off of Grace to You for like 20 hours or less of work a week. He's making money from the Master's Seminary, like over $100K. He's making over $100K at his church, Grace. And so you add this together, he's making I don't know if he takes money from book sales or not, but he's making a lot of money. But his stuff is, especially when you go away from the pulpit, like I think Grace to You just like repurposes all of his sermons and like little devotionals and things anyway. So, and I would not put John MacArthur in this Benny Hinn category, right?
Sure. But I think, so basically if we kind of total up, there's 3 different ministries, $400K for his primary, $100K for the Master's Seminary, and $100K for something else.
So Grace Community Church, that's the salary that's a little bit hazy. We don't know. Grace to You over $400,000 a year. Master's over $100,000. Okay. The church might be else. Maybe he's like, hey, church, don't pay me.
So the Grace Community Church is what we don't know, but could be around $100,000. Let's just he's making somewhere, let's say, between $500,000 and $700,000 for his 40 hours plus, because I'm sure he may not be today working that much, but there was a time when I'm sure he was putting in more than 40 hours.
I'm sure he was, when he was a young man, probably just like booking it. Yeah.
And so then if you look at the median salary of someone in that area of California, that's probably not, it's crazy, definitely within the double, right? If you do the double honor, then that's probably not unrealistic.
So what you're telling me is context makes a difference. Maybe if you're at a 50-person church in rural Missouri is different than being like in New York City at a 500,000 person church. That'd be a really big church, but like you got to take some of that into consideration. What do you think about do you take like the average church member into consideration, like what, or that doesn't matter? Is it like your ministry is to, I don't know, physicians? Like, does that change the calculus a little bit? I don't know.
The First Physicians Church. We only minister to physicians and lawyers or whatever. Yeah, something like that.
That's funny.
So here are some maybe things you should consider when trying to weigh. And obviously, we've been touting this equation. We're not going to give you spoiler alert.
Right.
We're not going to be able to give you an equation that gives you the exact number. But here are some things to consider. Is it too little? If your pastor is having to be bivocational, and maybe if it's a 13-person church in rural Arkansas,
probably makes sense.
Maybe it does make sense for it to be bivocational.
But if he's bivocational and you're in a 300-person church, that might be a problem on the congregation. You're like, wow, that's kind of shameful. Like you need to support your pastor.
Yeah. If your pastor is struggling to support a family at a normal level, like, we're not saying they should be able to go get the Bentleys, but if they are struggling to keep a car that's working, then that's and they're being good stewards of what you're giving them. You may not be giving them enough.
Yeah, I think all, and it's like you probably know. You probably know it when you see it to some extent. Like, it's okay to live a normal life. I think some people have this idea that, like, you're supposed to suffer in ministry. You know what I mean, too? Yeah. Where it's like, man, and I think everyone's in a different perspective. It'd be tough to be primary preaching pastor. This is probably a pride thing on my part. I probably would buy like a notch or two lower car than I needed to, just because you don't want to be like, oh, look at Zach strolling up in this car. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Even if it's like, no, it's actually pretty, this is like normal. You know what I mean? I'm managing finances well. It's just, you're in such a position where I think people can nitpick stuff, you know?
It's funny that you say that, because I think one of Joel's hopefully not oversharing about Joel's financial situations, but I think one of his brothers was a manager, head salesman or something at a Lexus dealership in Michigan, and just doing okay, and just wanted to bless his brother.
Oh yeah.
With, I don't know if it was a new Lexus, but it was a nice, good Lexus vehicle. And Joel would always say, "Yeah, my brother, I got this from my brother," because he didn't want people to be thinking that he was maybe misusing his money. But it's sad that
you'd have to
think that way. Yeah.
No, I think that's right. And it's like, to me, and maybe this is judgmental, probably is, but it's like when I look at like the Kenneth Copelands of the world and stuff, it just like hits me in the face that is so excessive. Like it's like you're not even trying to, you know.
Yeah, you should go look up this video if you haven't already seen it, where Inside Edition finds him, and I think he's like kind of open to more media attention. And then she starts hitting him with these hard hitting questions, and it's like he looks like he's demon possessed for a little bit.
It's scary.
It's crazy. Then I think you can tell like the gears are shifting in his mind, like, you better control your reaction here, because this is being recorded, type of thing. But if you're buying 2 private jets, nothing wrong with private jets.
Yeah.
But maybe you're on the too big of an end of your salary there.
No, that's good. I like these guiding principles. Consider the cost of living, like where you are. That's going to make a huge difference. Our church is in Charleston, high cost of living. That's why I live out in Somerville, where the houses are affordable, but it's like crazy.
That's why we live in North Goose Creek.
And South Carolina is like not an expensive state to live. I mean, like when you think about California and you think about something, I'm like, how is that a thing? Yeah. I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah, there are, like, when you're driving through a lot of rural South Carolina, you're like, how could I live out here
right.
and still make the same income that I make, inside the suburb of Charleston? But
we have this note on comparable roles. You kind of look at similar things, like a school principal, nonprofit director of a similar institution. Like, there's some give and take there, but you should be able to see, especially if you're like congregational led, whatever, and you're trying to like develop the budget. These things are important. Does the pastor have like 5 like grade school kids, or like 1 kid out of college?
Yeah, we have a whole section here to ask that, because some people will look for, we want a single pastor, we don't have to pay him as much. You know what I'm saying? Have you ever heard this?
That's wild. It makes them, kids ain't cheap.
Kids are not cheap. Kids aren't cheap. And so should you just pay the pastor for the job? Like, you're doing a good job, here's what this job is worth. Or should you take into account he's single, so we can pay him less? Or maybe on the other end, he's married with 5 kids. And they're all in private school. Yeah. Should we consider paying him more? Those are legitimate questions to ask.
Yeah. That's a great question. And part of it is too, like, our pastor, his kids are out of the house.
Right.
So should we pay him less? On the other side of things, he's got, 55 years of experience or whatever it is. It's like, well, that's valuable too, you know?
Right.
Versus someone who maybe has 10 years experience, but they do have 8 kids or whatever.
Yes, yeah. So context, like you said, matters, because how long they've been there, faithful, doing a good job. All those things should be part of the calculation.
No, that's good. And so I think if you're not thinking about it, or I think it's wise for a church to be reevaluating this often. I mean, like, especially in today's climate, it's like you got to be thinking about this. Don't just like, it's been like this for 10 years or whatever. That's a kind of scary place to be.
All right. So, kind of final thoughts, some practical wisdom, just some guidance. You want to, and you may not be in a leadership role, so you may not be able to act this, but if you are in a leadership role, or if you have a voice into this, it should be a I know salaries are always kind of touchy, but it should kind of be a transparent, non-touchy issue where you have some type of clear policies or thought process on how you're going to compensate a pastor. Joel is 72, I believe.
Something like makes
sense.
Yeah.
He's told us, in the next 3 years, I'm going to be looking to transition out of the pulpit for full-time ministry. That means we're looking for who's going to replace him, and we're going to be front and central trying to answer these questions, like how do we, pay? How do we find someone, and then what do we pay him?
Cool. Now that is good. Something I would hope that you do know what your pastor makes. Like, if you don't, you should ask. That should be like not the most top secret thing in the world. If it's top secret, you should worry like, is it excessive? Or are people like keeping this under wrap? I mean, like on the other end too, something. Transparency is great. Like you said, maybe it's a little more touchy, but it's just good for that accountability aspect. Yeah.
So it promotes accountability, and obviously we want his focus to be on his mission.
Yeah.
And so if you've selected the right person, then you should be able to pay them a reasonable amount so that they're not having to focus on finances all the time. They're able to be able to focus on the church and what needs to be done. Yeah.
Couldn't said it better myself.
All right. Any closing thoughts?
I think we just need to find a pastor who has major bookshelves. Problem solved. Then their salary is good.
John Piper. Are you looking to? Some of these people are kind of at the end, the end of their careers. I don't know how many years John Piper has left, but probably does not want to come to Charleston Bible.
Down. Well, I got nothing else. Does this conclude our series?
I think this concludes our series on finances. Joel may take, he may last a week or more, but I think
we're good.
We're good.
Sweet. All right.
Unless there's some great user comment that you want us to, maybe we'll pick up.
Maybe we should talk. Michael tells me that he sports gambles a lot. He's really big on that. So I'm throwing out there. We shouldn't talk about it anymore. Just leave it at that. Gambling. I'm just kidding. He does not.
Do you know anyone who sports gambles though?
I used to dabble a little bit. I don't anymore. But, as a young man,
Yeah. Were you overall up or down on it?
I thought I was doing really good. I looked back at it and I was overall it's like $50. Like, I didn't gamble a lot of money, but it's like a lot of time and effort for nothing. Like, right. I mean, it was more, and I viewed it as like, hey, instead of spending $3 a day on a cup of coffee, speaking of finances, have you ever heard this? Like, hey, if instead of buying a cup of coffee, you save that money, you'll have like a Corvette, or it's like, and I'm like, where's your
what coffee are you buying?
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. It's like everyone's got their, you want to be responsible, right. But it's like if you're not like, hey, here's my mortgage, let's put it all in black. That's a bad place to be. But I think there's a little leeway, and there's a difference between millions of dollars and pennies or whatever. Anyway,
all right, that is our take.
Thanks for listening to Take Two. Find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube for those who want to watch our videocast.